funny when people complain about top lane, they're never happy. They complain when top laners are tanky. They complain when top laners team fight. Yeah, and so it's a thing where it's like bruisers have this rotating balance because whenever they're like truly good at something, it tends to look kind of degenerate. It's like, oh, bruisers can team fight. So it's like, oh, bruisers can split push. Well, split pushing is kind of messed up, right? It's like bruisers can team fight. Well, why can they team fight? Because you can't just team fight on a bruiser, if that makes sense. Because you're a melee champion and you have to deal with the damage coming at you from like 5 different people, right? So bruisers can team fight is not as simple as bruisers can team fight. Like they have to be kind of like good at something. Like as an example, the reason Yasuo's wind wall is so insane is that if it wasn't insane, he would be a completely non-functional character in any sort of grouped setting, right? So like wind wall's crazy because it has to be. Viego's passive is crazy because it has to be. It must be crazy or you're literally non-functional in any sort of grouped fight. So then when you look at bruisers then, it's like, well, what do we need to give them to be functional in a group fight? Oh my god. What do we need to give them to be functional in a grouped fight? One of the things we could give them is healing, right? That's Death Dance. Death Dance says, like, you don't die and you heal. That means that if something goes wrong, you can still come back. But then we're like, well, healing's unfair, right? Healing is OP. Like, how do I kill this guy? He keeps healing up. It's like, okay, well, what's next? It's like, well, then there's Sterix Gauge. Sterix Gauge means that you don't die because you have tons of health. And it's like, okay, that's cool, but that's actually kind of unfair because now bruisers are taking the spot of tanks. They're really, really tanky and they don't die. Okay, well then let's give them tons of cooldown reduction. Well, that's not fair because now I can't find any like window to abuse Jax because his E is always up, right? And so the thing that's going on is just like there's a lot of ways that we could potentially like make bruisers in quotes good at team fighting, but each way we do it tends to have like some negative outcome in terms of like how they feel to play against. But then the question is, well, like what can they be good at, right? And that's the difficulty. Because again, to be good at team fighting, like truly viable at team fighting, you do have to be silly at something. Like that's why Yasuo has wind wall. You might be like, well, why don't you just make them fair, right? Well, the thing is like, I'm going to use this like by talking about lethality characters. Like, why do bruisers sometimes go lethality? Like, say lethality Vi. Lethality Vi has been a thing for like literal years, but very rarely does Vi end up going lethality. And usually when she's going lethality, it's usually because her bruiser build doesn't work. And you might think, well, that's odd. Lethality Vi is pretty crazy, is she not? Like, she jumps on an AD carry, untargetable stun, and kills them. Like, that's pretty unfair. Like, why not just go lethality every game? Huh? And the thing about lethality Vi, or lethality bruisers, is that they aren't versatile. And that's actually a very damning thing to be in regards to, like, viability in League of Legends. If your character isn't versatile, it means things like, oh, I ran in on lethality Vi, I tried to one-shot the AD carry, but oops, the AD carry flashed, right? They used flash. Now I die. The result of that is that I die. And so actually, for a character to have to put themselves at great risk to get a kill and not be like able to then be versatile with that risk, meaning like, oh, if they flash away, I can get out because I can go untargetable. Or if they flash away, I don't die because I'm super tanky, right? Yeah, that's like all assassins. Well, it's not like all assassins, actually, because assassins can get out. If Kha'Zix jumps on you and he fails, he can push R, right? And that's why he's okay, right? If Zed jumps on you and he fails, he can use his R to teleport backwards. Like, one of the properties of being a viable assassin is not just that you can assassinate people, it's also that if your assassination fails, you aren't completely left out to dry. And so many assassins have things on their kit that say, like, oh, once you engage, it's not an L if the AD carry escapes from you. Obviously, it's not ideal, but you still have things you can do aside from just stand there and die. So yeah, then tying back to bruisers, it's a thing where it's like, bruisers, to be truly viable in a grouped setting, kind of have to do something that's a little crazy to account for the fact that they're going to have 5 people turning and wailing on them. And so yeah, mainly just noting that, like, the balanced state of bruisers is a very complex space, because the things they have to do to truly be viable in a specific setting generally have to look a little messed up. Because if they don't look messed up, they actually probably aren't being effective. And the reason is because of what happens when they fail. Will AATROX W ever be reverted to dealing physical damage? Probably not. We'd change it to magic damage so he wouldn't build lethality. So we probably wouldn't change that. Now, that said, I think a really reasonable question to ask is like, was AATROX building lethality because his spells did physical damage, or was he building lethality because the bruiser items were non-functional for him? And so it's very possible that like characters like BRIAR and AATROX, as an example, could have their physical damage back at some point, because maybe the reasons they were building lethality is their kits just didn't work with bruiser items, and bruiser items weren't tuned to like work with them. Should AD assassins be made more supportive? They use team support characters and master and run around and take fights. The question is like, would assassin players really want that? There's a lot of ways we can just make assassins win more. Like we could just give them more move speed. We could make it so they heal allies whenever they kill someone. But that doesn't necessarily mean the assassin players will enjoy the game more by doing that. Like people are playing assassins for a reason, and that reason is killing their opponent, right? So like there's a lot of ways we could make assassins win more games and feel terrible. So the question would be, it's like, hey, we could make assassins more supportive, right? Like that's a thing we could do. But like, is that actually a way to make assassin players enjoy the game more? Because one of the worst things you can do to a character is make it win more in a way they don't like. That sucks. Because if your character is winning all its games and not fun, because like it's not powerful at the things you want it to be powerful at, you're in a really rough spot where we'll never touch your character because, in quotes, it's fine, right? Because it's winning all its games, but it will feel bad at the things you want it to feel good at. Ajax FC says like, hey, well, assassins are already played supportively, so could they be stronger and less frustrating if they're more supportive? They were banned a lot when they were strong in less supportive ways. Yeah, but the thing is again, it's like, what do players want, right? So like, I could make you stronger at Zed by making it so you heal your teammates whenever you kill someone, right? Like I could do that, right? Not saying that I should, but like I could do that. But I don't think that would necessarily result in Zed players being like, my character functions, right? And so it's a thing where it's like, yes, we could buff assassins in supportive ways, but that doesn't mean they're good at like the reason people are playing them, right? Like we run this with AD carries a lot, where like AD carries for the entirety of League's history are one of the most overpowered roles in the game. It's just true. You need an AD carry every game, no matter what, most of the time. But there have also been metas where, despite the fact that you need them every single game, they feel terrible to play, right? And so it's kind of a thing where it's like, well, if the reason AD carries are good is because they're absolutely useless at fighting enemies, but really, really good at taking towers, that's like, that character is viable. They might even be OP. That doesn't mean they're fun or powerful in a way that people actually want or enjoy, right? And so that's the thing you have to think about with assassins, is like, yes, we could buff them in a lot of ways that are not frustrating, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's good for the assassins. I'll start with this. It's like, if our goal is to not make assassins is to make assassins completely non-frustrating, my argument would be, well, we probably shouldn't have assassins because they do something very frustrating. They kill you, right? And so I would argue that like we have to accept an amount of frustration with assassins just because that's the whole point of them. And so to find ways that like buff their win condition that feels acceptable to players, I think is like the more important thing, as opposed to giving them a completely different win condition that assassin players like aren't really interested in. That would be like the risk, I think.